recognizing his ability as a thought leader and a change maker. He was selected as a leader of tomorrow by the St. Gallen Symposium, Switzerland. Further, distinguishing his existing and ongoing work as world class, he has been endorsed by the Royal Society UK as an individual with exceptional promise to become a world leader in his particular field. He has over 10 plus years of experience in this field, and we are extremely glad to have him here with us today. With this, I request Nishikant sir to take over this call.
Thank you so much, Sakshi, for this wonderful introduction. And good afternoon to everyone. And if you're joining from outside India, good morning to you. And it's great to be here in this panel discussion and to moderate this session. We have some great speakers here. And before we begin, I would just like to just mention one house rule, I would call it, is that if you have any questions for the panelists, please type them in the message box mentioning who the question is for, and we'll take this up during the question answer session towards the end of the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Now, to begin this session, I would like to introduce our panelists. To begin with, we have Mr. Divyang Waghela with us, who joined the Tata Trust in 2008 and currently heads Tata Water Mission, that is the drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene portfolio at the Trust. He pursued his MBA with specialization in finance and has been working in the development sector for more than 15 years. He anchored India's one of the biggest fellowship programs named Zilla Swachh Bharat Parerak ZSSB, a collaborative effort of Tata Trust and Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation, Government of India, which was designed to support Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin by placing young professionals across 500 districts in 29 states. His areas of interest are working on sustainable development processes through technology innovations and community approaches in the social development space, specifically in water security, climate change, and sanitation sectors. So welcome to you, sir. Moving on, we have Dr. Mark Everard here, who's completed his PhD in the early 1980s and since been active in academia, business, NGOs, as well as has 22 years in the public sector on issues of biodiversity, ecosystem services, and resource security. He's an author of over 120 scientific papers and 30 books. Mark has both an applied and conceptual interest in these matters, active in international development, at least pre-COVID, and as advisor to a number of NGOs as well as at the Science Policy Interface. Mark is also a communicator contributing to a variety of magazine and other media as well as radio and television, including BBC, Spring Watch, and New. In addition to his role as Associate Professor of Ecosystem Services at the University of the West of England, Bristol, UK, Mark does consultancy work in addition to his writing and other media interests. Water, livelihoods, nature conservation, and associated ecosystem services have been the key theme of his various interests, research, and development projects. Huge warm welcome to you, Mark. Now, our third panelist is Mr. Shirish Apte, who has been working with the Water Resource Department, Government of Maharashtra, and has received numerous awards, including the Best Engineer Award by the Government of Maharashtra in 2003, the National Productivity Council Award in 2004 for water management of the Pench project, the Chief Minister's Award for Best Financial Management of Irrigation Project, honorable mention in 5 Water Warriors of India, and has received an award from the India Today Group in Community Mobilizer category for his initiative of rejuvenation of Malguzari tanks through community participation. Huge warm welcome to you, sir, as well. So now, with this introduction, the way we've designed this panel is that we have a series of questions. I wouldn't say they are questions, but more like guiding pointers, which I will request each of the panelists in no particular order to respond to them. And then as the discussion processes towards the end, we'll take questions from the audience as well. So to begin this, I think, we all want to know the theme of this World Water Day for this year is, what does water mean to you? What value does it have to you? And whether it's true to you personally, importance in a personal level, also, you can look at, the work you do through your organization or through any of the other work you're doing as well. So to begin with, let me ask Mr. Shirish Apte ji, what does water mean to you as an individual and also through the work that you've been doing? Over to you, sir. I think you're muted, Shirish ji.
Okay. For me, water is life. I also consider water as a means for economic development of the region. Since I belong to underdeveloped region of Maharashtra, that is Vidarbha, in our area, when we started working on water conservation, we have realized that through our conservation efforts, now farmers in our area can grow 2 crops in a year. because of this, around the year there is availability of fodder for the animals. The farmers have also taken an initiative in developing a small scale dairy industry, and because of the availability of water around the year, fishermen are also getting an opportunity to develop their more harvest around the year. So in short, we are, we have provided through our efforts of water conservation and rejuvenation of malresidents, we have provided water around the year to the farmers, and which was used by the farmers and other stakeholders as a means of development.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that. Now, over to you, Mark. In your opinion, what does water mean to you through your work personally? So, all yours. You're muted, Mark.
Okay, have you got me? Yes.
Yeah.
I can only add to that water is a living thing. I mean, in our world, and particularly the Western world that I live in, it's treated as a utility. But because we treat it as a utility, we ignore the fact that it brings us pleasure, like my pet fish here, my chota mashli, keep me company. It's a thing of beauty. It's a carrier of energy. It's a carrier of nutrients. It's got spiritual importance. It's got cultural importances. And we need to treat it as something that is the lifeblood of the planet. It is the thing that is a medium for the continuation of life. And we need that breadth of vision if we are to manage it sustainably.
Thank you, Mark. It's really important. You mentioned the word sustainable as well. We'll get to that over the course of the other questions. Over to you, Divyangji. What does water mean to you in your own words? Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Nishikant, and congratulations to Tahaan team for this wonderful interaction. I think everyone, as we know, that water is a quite precious and scarce resource, and for all vital form of known forms of life. Water is socially, culturally, and economically associated with us. So it's very difficult to say and define it into a very single form. As many of you, I think I'm also quite privileged to have enough regular water with me. But I started actually valuing it in real terms when I encountered a life-changing experience during my early stage of career. I was a part of one water program in Gujarat, and we were working for a small communities in tribal areas of South Gujarat. So we actually, in one day, we had to have a launching of that scheme. So we went there, and there was a small inauguration of that water supply system happen. It was a gravity-based system. When the water actually came into the taps of those people in that particular village, most of the people, the elderly people, the pradhan and others, started actually touching our feet. And I think I was quite young that time. And then I realized the gratitude what they've shown, because after, even after 60 years of independence, they didn't get the water at the doorstep. They had to walk a long distance. That time I realized the value of water is different for individual to individual. And I think that's why every day your need for water is different. So I think, as other panel members say, water is a life. And I think it's very, very important when we start valuing water, we start respecting water in all ways. So that's, I think, the what water means to me in my life. It's a changing, it's not static. Every day we find something different for water, and I also face the same thing.
Thank you so much, Divyangji. I think, I really liked you said we should need to respect water. I see people, in cities like this, we are privileged to have a constant supply of water in our taps. I always say, try to imagine if you didn't have this on a daily basis, or you only had 2 hours a day. And across India, people are going through that. It's even in metro cities as well. So I think it's very nice, the way you said respect water to what it is today. Okay, having just gone through that, so a couple of very important points and thought-provoking mentions as well. What I will now do is, maybe turn it a bit more. We constantly talk about, bridging the science policy practice divide. And we say that, for a holistic management of water, we need science, we need to influence policy, and yes, we need the data from the ground as well. So going forward, in terms of if we want to conserve the water that we have as it is today and also for future generation, what do you think should the approach be taken by at all levels of governance in terms of bridging the science policy practice divide? And if it is there, is it needed? Where do we stand, and how do we need to work forward in trying to get to achieve this, to bridge this divide as well? So let me begin with Divyang ji on this, and I'll come to the other panelists. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks, Nishikant. I think it's a very critical point. But I think first, before we get into that policy aspects, we need to actually demystify the whole water value chain. And when I say water value chain, we need to look at from source to the storage, to the distribution, to consumption, to the discharge or reuse. So once you start doing this whole segmentation of water, and then you start looking at which area would require what kind of intervention, which area would require more support by the private sector, which area would require more interventions from the government, either at the policy level or the implementation level. Currently, if you look at it globally, I think the freshwater availability is very, very limited. And I think if you look at in Indian context, I think the availability of water has been now considerably going on, loads over a period of last 2 to 3 decades. And if we see next 10 years, one of the reports of Niti Aayog mentions that our supply is going to be half the demand. So we are going to have almost only 50% of the water, which is what we need for our consumption. And consumptions could be for drinking purpose, domestic use, agriculture, industrial, ecology. So I think there is a variety of areas where I think we need to look at. So one thing is about what I feel in terms of when you talk about the conservation policies, the first part is about the source part in terms of how we can strengthen the sources. Again, would like to quote 1 or 2 data points. If you look at in India, in terms of the per capita water storage capability, which is, if I'm not wrong, it's around 190 meter cube per capita. Whereas if you see these countries like South Africa or China, it's around close to 569 to 590 meter cube per person. So if you look at, I think the conservation part, obviously our population is quite huge, so we also have challenges. But if you look at the disparity between us and the other globally, we need to work a lot in terms of the conservation. Another statistics, 8% of the rainwater is currently being stored. So I think the substantial amount of water is not in a position to store. And why? Because I think our storage capability is comparatively lower. I think these are some of the challenges which I feel in terms of the macro level. I just moved to a bit from macro level to a bit on a micro level. I think we need to look at more collective action. And I would say when a collective action, it should be both sides. It should be look at the supply management side as well as the demand management side. And who is basically I would say customer. I generally don't like to use the word customer, but who is the ultimate, the user of this water? If we actually put them at the center point, the user as a manager or user who has to manage this water, I think the whole equation will actually, turn differently. So in that context, what I feel in micro level, we need to look at more decentralized level, bottom-up approach in conservation measures in the country like India, because we are quite diverse. We have a different ecology. We have different terrains. Rajasthan is different than the Ganges or Assam, and we have a different like 7,000 kilometer long coastline to the Himalayan range. So I think we have a quite diversity in nature. We need to look at if we want to really create a strategy to become a self-reliant for water needs, we need to have a more regional diversity to be captured into our planning process. And that could be definitely captured as a policy, but at the more in the policy, we need to start actually working with the users and consumers of that water. Once they start understanding, as I mentioned, the valuing and respecting the water, I think identifying these solutions would not be a big challenge for us. So that's what I feel in terms of look at both macro perspective as well as the micro perspective in a tandem, so that I think we can find out the right solutions in policy level or at the solutions level.
Thank you so much, Divyangji. I think that's very valuable. Working up, we always come to think, when it comes to policies, it's always good to have a top-down approach, but sometimes, that's not always applicable if you look at the success of any solutions being implemented at the grassroots level. So having this bottom-up approach could go a long way in trying to achieve some of the goals that we plan to do. Now, over to Mark. Mark, your input on this topic.
Yes. Okay. Well, I could talk all day on it, but I'm going to look at two things in particular about the science policy practice interfaces. And one of them is the need for systems thinking, and the other is to move the focus away from exploitation. And the two are obviously linked. The policy sectors that we traditionally divide countries in, your country, my country, all the rest of it, all of them are beneficiaries of the water cycle. So defense, if there's water sufficiency, there is peacemaking, peacekeeping. If there's water conflict, there is potentially armed conflict. So the defense sector is central to water policy. Transport, it's a user of water, it's a potential contaminator of water, but it suffers flood risk because we put straight lines across landscapes and we ignore the way that water flows through landscapes. So again, we fail to think of water as a living thing that we need to adapt those policy areas to. The same with urban planning, rural land use. I mean, farming is a dominant land use internationally, in India, in the UK, wherever. But we don't think, what is this land use doing to the storage of water, the contamination of water, the exacerbation of drought and flood? We kind of think, okay, we do the farming, someone else does the water management. Actually, water management, as in all attributes of ecosystems, are central to manufacturing, to trade, to international development. So we need to get more systemically connected, that water is a medium for all of those things. I'm running a program called Reconnecting Society with its Ecological Roots here in the UK. And it's worth mentioning that we are now in the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, which is a spur for us all to think in this more connected way. That brings me on to the second thing of exploitation. Our technological and our policy focus has been to be better and more efficient and more long distance about the diversion, the exploitation of water. So Delhi runs a little short of water, so we build another dam up in the Himalaya and take the water hundreds of kilometers to it. And we don't think, well, what does that do to the replenishment of the Ramganga and the Kosi, all of those Ganga tributaries, Yamuna? Who does it dispossess? What does it do to the ecosystem? What is the ecosystem consequence for the well-being of the millions that live in that catchment system? The focus is more from further, is a metaphor for it. Let's extract more from deeper in the ground or further away to serve this fragmented policy environment, because manufacturing needs more, urban development needs more. If we can think more locally, more in terms of balancing recharge with exploitation, then we have a more cyclic, a more sustainable, a more renewable world. But it does require branching across policy areas and seeing water as something that we need to balance in terms of recharge with exploitation. And that's kind of missing globally at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think that's a very thought-provoking and actually gets people thinking as well, especially me, because we somehow seem to, even departments work in silos. The water sector in itself is a different silo. You've been working in the Himalayas as well for the last, over 10 years. And you've also seen how even if a river flows through a forest, they both are considered different, have different departments, not realizing that one is important for the other. So it's really important to have that thinking that let's have a more holistic approach on what we are doing and how one ecosystem is impacting the other, or one system is impacting the other as well. So thank you for that. Now over to you, Shirish, your views on this topic.
So far India is concerned, the country is by and large divided into two parts, the upper part of India and peninsular India. The peninsular India has huge population to cater for. And in peninsular India, all our water is coming only by means of monsoon rains. So we store monsoon rain and use it over the years. Over the year, in peninsular India, the urbanization is much more. For example, in Maharashtra, we have 56% population living in urban area. So there is a conflict between rural area and urban area. As Divyang has rightly suggested, that the issue has to be divided into two parts: supply side management and demand side management. So in peninsular India, we have huge problem regarding supply side management because we cannot construct a new dam or any new reservoir these days because of environmental concern, because of forest issues. So because of this, we have some limitation. So we cannot really focus our approach towards supply side management. So now the another alternative is to focus on demand side management. In urban areas, especially all major cities in Maharashtra, we have around 40% or more than that water losses in our distribution network. So first we have to take care of that. If we can reduce the line losses within the pipeline network within the city, then it will help to overcome some problems. Secondly, in all major cities in peninsular India, we have traditional or later on developed lakes and water reservoirs. The condition of this reservoir is very bad. Most of the water reservoirs and lakes are highly polluted. If we take care of these lakes and reservoirs and rejuvenate them, this will certainly help us in groundwater recharge. And once groundwater is available to us, we can certainly use groundwater. Presently, what is the practice in our cities? Maybe it's Pune, Bombay, or Nagpur, Aurangabad, whatever. We are using drinking water for allied purposes, for gardening, for washing our vehicles, for other utilities. So, which is not good. So, we must focus more on utilizing groundwater. And for that, if we go on utilizing groundwater for a decade or so, the groundwater level will deplete. So once we have our lakes in good condition in urban area, then we can certainly, that will certainly help us in groundwater recharging and which can be harnessed further. However, presently, India doesn't have any policy in rejuvenation of urban lakes. So first we have to fix that and then we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shiriji. I think that's a very important point. And, the work Tahaan has also been doing, in rainwater harvesting, that's one aspect, where if societies are able to store this water and use that water, say washing the vehicles in the parking every morning or using to just clean the, water the plants, which is there in the society and not use the drinking water, which is there, which can actually be used for longer time because majority of the societies get tanked water from the tankers. That's an additional cost to the society as well. So it has a bit of economic value as well. So that's really important. And Tahaan is working towards that as well in Pune with quite a few societies as well. So thank you so much, panelists. And I'll quickly move to the third discussion point. What I have mentioned here is that you all have worked over the course of your decade-long work and more, and come up with, I won't call them solution, but I'll call them like a package of solutions, and how these have made impact on the ground, whether at various level, whether at the community level or at the practitioner level, and which you think has the potential, either as a whole or parts of it to be replicated in other areas of India, maybe in the entire Indian Himalayan region or even the Hindu Kush Himalayan region or even abroad. So if you can just quickly give the audience just one success stories from your work, then it will be really quite a nice one for the audience. And also this can be shared later on with your assistants on the website as well. So I'll start with Mark. Mark, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love about India, apart from the people and the food and the music and everything, is I go to villages and I speak to people who are ostensibly illiterate, but they have thousands of years of water wisdom. I'm educated a certain way, and our wisdom is all on the exploitation side. But people who have lived in the Thar Desert or communities that have lived there for millennia have millennia of wisdom systematized. And with Water Harvest, I sort of co-wrote this book to try and harness the many, 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 many examples of brilliant stuff from Chokka to Roofwater Harvesting to Tanka to a whole host of systems. So instead of one example, I'm going to tell you that there are myriad examples, and they're all geographically and culturally very tightly attuned to the places, and they've got thousands of years in some cases of wisdom. Taran Bharat Sang, I think we all know, I've worked with Taran Bharat Sang over the years as well as Water Harvest. But one I'd like to pick up is one that I'm trying to introduce into Indian thinking. And had I been able to get to India last year and this, I would have driven it. One of the big successes in South Africa is the management of invasive trees, particularly Australian trees, because the native trees are water conservative, whereas as a generality, particularly eucalypts are very thirsty trees with long, long tap roots. And in some catchments, they can reduce surface runoff or mean annual runoff by 90%. I mean, absolutely massive. So the Working for Water program in South Africa that's been going since it was co-set up by Guy Preston and Nelson Mandela at independence, it mixes employment skills for people who have been intergenerationally unemployed, biodiversity gain through getting rid of the wood, economic products for the thinned wood, but the payback mainly is water, by increasing the available water in catchments. So I did some work in Haryana and Rajasthan, literally counting trees in villages, and then doing literature review of what if you replace the safeda trees, the eucalypts, with neem, which is more water conservative, doing the literature reviews to compare them, and coming up with some staggering figures. In some villages, the trees are using more than the people consume and cook and their livestock use, and they use for irrigation. And that's just one extreme. So lateral thinking outside of India, as well as surfacing the deep history of water knowledge and integrating that in the way we plan cities and do the modern stuff as well, all has a place. I really think this tree-based one can make a big difference in places like probably Maharashtra, but certainly Rajasthan, Haryana, that are, plains India and water stressed.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think what really I echo this. We go to a site, as researchers or as scientists or as practitioners, and we think we know it all, and we've gone there to educate the locals. And there's years of traditional wisdom, or you can call it indigenous knowledge. If only we just stopped and listened to them first, even when devising a plan for a particular area or a project for a particular area, it can be so nicely improved and also have a long-term sustainability in that particular area and ownership from local communities as well. So thank you for that. Now over to you, Divyangji, for your views.
So Nishikant, I think I just would like to touch upon one small point what Mark mentioned. So I think off late what happened, and I think and you also spoke about it. Off late, as a development professionals or a development practitioners, sometimes we start actually giving prescriptions to the communities rather than giving them a basket of options as a solutions. When we start giving a prescription, so then we think that we know the problem and we know the solutions. I think rather than that, we need to look at how the people understand their problem and find out the solution at their own. We actually become a more catalytic and facilitator role to go through that process. That's, I think, important. And I definitely resonates with that point with Mark and you, because they have a huge, very good indigenous knowledge, traditional understanding. I think we need to just build that system with some kind of a, more scientific approach or a knowledge. So that's what I wanted to add on that. And I think the experience perspective, I think, so I've worked with, in my current job, I've been associated with close to, 50 to 60 programs, and we reached out around 5,000 plus villages in more than 12 states. I think every village is a different story in terms of different problem, different solution, different experience also. However, because we always want to achieve the scale, this island of success it doesn't help in terms of achieving solving the large problems. So we need to create an island of success which can actually replicable across the particular geography or a set of villages or a set of geography. I have two examples, but I just would like to have a very quickly take as one example, specifically in the India Himalayan region, which I think is one of the areas which have been facing quite a serious water issues over a period of last decade or so. So we, as a Tata Trust, we work in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Leh, Nagaland, Mizoram, and we found that the springs, which is a core source both for drinking as well as the livelihood, has been drying up quite fast. Women have to walk now close to 3 to 5 kilometers in hills just to fetch 10 to 20 liters of water, and that's, I think, the pain which I think you and me can't understand. The women who is fetching that water can understand. So we started actually looking at how we try and ensure that these dying springs can be rejuvenated. So that's I think one area we started. We started actually looking at the understanding the whole demand and supply gap part. We understood the local knowledge available about the springs. They know that since how many years the springs have been, how this has changed its course, what are the reasons behind changing the course, whether it's a landslide, whether it's something else. So we started understanding it data from the community. Then we actually brought the science around it. So how we understand the geohydrology, how we understand the aquifer management system, we understand the catchment area and all those things. Then we need to started working on a combination of these two things. And we started doing it. I think the community started coming together and started taking ownership of actually managing those springs. And as you rightly mentioned, sometimes the department work in silos, but I think if the problem is with the community, they find out the best way to solve it. So they started engaging with the community, government departments, and ensure that they understand how they can actually revive those springs. One very important and very interesting point, we started calling something called Dhara Janampatri. Every individual has a kundali. We follow a lot of things on that, but whether we have those data of those springs, how it's behaving over a period of 20, 30, 50 years, and what is going to, we can actually do some prediction based on some of the data analysis and ensure that we revive those springs, rejuvenate those springs for a future. So that was the one experience. We did it in Uttarakhand on a close to 300 plus villages. We did the same work in Himachal Pradesh. We replicate the same model in Nagaland with the government, rural development, land resource development. I think we started actually this island of success started spreading across the country with the similar set of issues. So that is the one example. What I feel we need to start replicating those knowledge, those ideas, those innovations to the policy making, to the people who can really implement it. Not only we keep it close to us. There are many NGOs, partners who have been working and doing excellent work in the same space. We are not the only one. But I think this sharing knowledge, sharing experiences helps in terms of spreading these successes to the larger scale. So that's the one area which I feel is important. One small additions I just would like to add. I think we need to also understand that every geography has a different set of problems and different set of insights. We need to define more decentralized planning process. And what Mark mentioned, I think we need to go very, very micro level to design our planning process. I think the whole thinking about the engineer can only solve the problem is not the right thing. We need to look at the engineering, the social engineering elements to be part of it and design and strategize something for a longer term time. So these are the two areas which I feel is critical in our work. And I think that could be taken up by many partners or many institutions going forward.
Thank you so much, Divyangji. I think it's really important. Each area, like you mentioned, has different issues. And one way to also look at it is, look at the traditions and taboos also in some areas. They have that associated with the river. The river brings in fertile land and it gives livelihoods to people. So they also worship. So all those need to come in as well. And you rightly mentioned, it's important to share information. The way we call it, every time we say share data, it gets people a bit nervous. So we say, how about you share information? You don't share data, you share information. And then that gets people talking as well. So thank you so much for that. Shirishji, over to you, your thoughts on a successful practice which has the potential to be replicated.
I'm based in Nagpur. This is a Vidarbha region of Maharashtra. In our Vidarbha region, we have long tradition of water conservation. 300 years back, the kingdom of Gond Kingdom of Nagpur Bhoslas, they have constructed huge number of tanks. We call it tanks. In some areas, people call it lake or reservoir or whatever, different names. But these lakes were constructed 300 years back, and they are technically so precise that in a typical classical water conservation manner, these tanks has been constructed from ridge to valley. This is a very classic case. I have studied traditional irrigation system all over the India, but this is very peculiar. The tanks has been constructed from ridge to valley. Secondly, in case of these farmers in command area, the water entitlement has been provided by the government. The king himself has, in those days, they used to maintain a typical revenue record system. In this revenue record system, the water entitlements were offered to farmers and due mention is there. Third and most important thing, the water management of these tanks is community based. There are water user association traditionally, and those water user association are informal in nature, and they are still in existence, and they are working nicely. So what I have done in 2008, when I was posted in Bhandara district, I have started rejuvenating these tanks. First of all, I begin with my own jurisdiction, and later on, we have pursued government of Maharashtra to look into this aspect. Government of Maharashtra appointed one committee to look into it. I was member secretary of that. Based on our findings, government of Maharashtra has formulated a policy how to rejuvenate this, and subsequently respect in so as to carry out this work, government resolutions were issued, and such resolution was subsequently adopted by other departments. So we started working on this in 2008, and now up to 2020, we have rejuvenated almost 3,400 tanks. In this region, we have 6,900 tanks. We have long way to go. But why I am mentioning here, the similar type of tanks or lakes has been constructed by various dynasties all over the India, especially in Bihar. We have this. We have this small jamindaris. We have this small riyasat. They have developed their own tank system, especially in central Bihar. Then we have a series of such tanks constructed by Chandel dynasty in Bundelkhand region. Then we have similar tank system in eastern part of Madhya Pradesh. We have similar tank system in northern part of Karnataka. So the initiative on which I have worked can easily be replicated across the India, because every state, especially in the eastern and southern part of India, there is a long tradition of water tanks constructed by various kingdoms and dynasties. Issue is how to rejuvenate that. Presently in Maharashtra, we have the policy. Same policy can be adopted, and we can do a wonderful job. Let me tell you my findings after carrying out this exercise. In 2008, we have started working on developing the Malguzari tank of Bhandara and Gondia district. And in up to 2013-14, the findings are available with me based on the figures from economic survey data of Maharashtra. Our per capita income for Bhandara district was 36,786. In 13-14, it becomes 75,604. In as far as Gondia district is concerned, the per capita income in year 2008 and 9, 31,875, and 13-14 is rose up to 68,665. So from this data, it is absolutely clear that we can double the income of farmers in a particular district if we work on that. And earlier, both of our districts were under the category of aspirational district. But after working on this initiative, the districts have come above the poverty line level, and now we are this district and many other adjoining districts, they are not under aspirational district tag. So we can achieve this. There will be, if we work on that, there will certainly a reduction in absolute poverty. The income level will grow up. The farmers will be benefited. They will start developing small scale dairies and other initiatives. So in my opinion, this is the initiative which can be replicated anywhere in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shiriji. I think one very important thing you mentioned right in the beginning, which I picked up, was that get your home in order first before you're trying to replicate in other areas. So you did it in your own district and you showed that success story before you moved on to the other district and then actually approached the government, because you had that data and the success to actually showcase that this can be done, and it can be done throughout Maharashtra, and then show it to the government as well. So thank you very much for that. And now, looking at the time, what I will quickly do now is get to some of the questions which have come from the people who have attended this, from the participants. And if okay, so the first question that has been asked is by one of the participants is, what is the core of this problem, which is water scarcity, and is there any long-term solution to it? So I'll since the panelist name is not mentioned, I'd like to direct this to Divyangji. Would you like to answer this question?
Sure. I think in terms of whatever the knowledge or small experience I have, I can just attempt to answer that question. So I think it's a quite a long-term process. It's not going to be an easy process to look at a long-term solution. So, and we need to look at, as I mentioned earlier, also at the both policy level and also at the grassroots level. I think in recently, if you are aware about that, the government of India has been actually started looking at the water as very critical, and they have also started looking at how they are bringing together the all water related department into a single umbrella ministry called Ministry of Jal Shakti. They've started quite a big effort in terms of water conservation across the country, specifically in terms of the areas which are like water stressed. There are a lot of new projects which have come up, Atal Bhujal Yojana, which is, I think, specifically focusing on water stress, 158 blocks across the country. Similarly, I think that's the one as a policy level which is happening. But I think it's important in terms of if you want to ensure that this is a long-term solution. I think we, as again mentioned earlier, it's important that the users have to actually be at central point of everything, be it a policy, be it a solution finding aspects, or be it a kind of a behavioral change element. So if we can keep the user as a center point and then start building those blocks around it, I think the water conservation could be effectively be done. There are two areas which I feel is critical, as I mentioned earlier, also the supply and demand both. We have done one small work, and I just would like to highlight here that we have started working with the communities about the water budgeting. Many organizations have been doing it, and I think we have also been doing it in a similar way. That is not a big sign, but we try to actually educate them about how much water they have. So in terms of the groundwater, surface water, whatever I think water they have, how much water they have, and what is the water they are using. So what is the demand in the particular watershed level or particular cluster of village level. Once they understand what is the supply and demand, and if there is a water gap, so whether they can water positive or they could be a water negative. So they need to actually become a water neutral or water positive in a way. So if you want to actually look at the long-term solution, they need to be water solution. We need to be a water positive. So to become a water positive, they need to understand they have to optimize their demand. So and that would require quite a big effort in terms of a changing in cropping pattern, agriculture practices. They need to go with the more low water intensive cropping mechanism, but at the same time, they should also get the equal remuneration. So that's, I think, the demand management is very, very critical. But again, that depends on the community. That depends on the farmers. They should not be at the losing end. At the end of the day, they also have to, earn that bread and butter. So they need to understand that demand optimization is one area. Second is around enhancing the supply management element, and there both the government can play a big role, the non-profit or a civil society can play a big role, and the community has to play a big role. So I think the combination of efforts between both supply and demand management will help us in terms of solving this problem. And we need to actually demystify or break this problem into a very, very micro level and start working on it. Again, repeating the bottom-up approach, finding a community at the center, trying to provide them a right kind of a technology solutions, knowledge, and whatever the financial resources or any technical or knowledge resources to be provided to them. And then I think start working on it. So based on that, I think that kind of a decentralized way of implementation would help in terms of finding the right kind of solutions.
Thank you so much, Divyang, and I hope that's answered the question for the participant. Now we have two more questions. The first one is we have two questions related to COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to club them together, and this will be for you, Mark. How has the pandemic affected our water resources, or will potentially continue to affect our water resources? And how, from comfort from our homes, we make maximum impact and save water?
Okay, yes, thank you. I did do some research, published some stuff last year about COVID and water, or COVID and ecosystems. And it's a bit gloomy because one conclusion is that COVID-19 won't be the last zoonotic pandemic. What we've been doing, because we have such a utilitarian view of ecosystems generally, water, but forests and everything else, we kind of convert them into currency. We convert them into rupees or pounds or euros or dollars or whatever it is by the most rapid means, without thinking about the viability of water cycles, the integrity of forests, and their multiple ecological, social, chemical, hydrological, spiritual values. In exactly the same way I started talking about the meaning of water. I mean, that is the meaning of ecology and life to me. We don't see ourselves as multifaceted elements of this thing. So we break down the firewalls, and so the microbes that infect mammals particularly then have an easier passage into humanity. That's pretty much behind Ebola, SARS, you name it, West Nile virus, and all of these zoonotic diseases. And it's getting worse. I mean, just one amazing statistic: of the mammalian biomass on Earth, only 6% is wild, 96% is humans and our livestock. And that is a staggering figure. So is it surprising that the firewalls have been broken? The second side of that equation is that, you know, we know the guidance about washing your hands and good hygiene and water use for treating sick people and all the rest of it. And yet 2/3 of the people in the world don't have that. So if we divorce the water crisis from the pandemic crisis, from the biodiversity crisis, from the climate crisis, then we're just putting things in these pigeonholes that is leading us to all of these problems. All of these problems have the integrity, the functionality of ecosystems at their core. So this goes back to what I first started saying, that we need to reconnect society's policy areas to recognize that we, humanity, are a subset of the ecosystem. And we need to remarshal what we do to recognize that fundamental fact before we break down the very life support systems that we absolutely depend on now and into the future.
Thank you for this, for that, Mark. You know, and it's a very important thing. You know, we say that, you know, in COVID time, you know, wash your hands regularly. And one topic which we really had to deal with last year was during flooding. You didn't have clean water to wash your hands. I mean, the areas were flooded. Look at Bihar, look at the Tarai in Nepal, and you know, so you need that the clean water not just for hygiene or even for drinking water, but also now for additional thing, which was to wash your hands regularly so that you were protected from the virus. So it got a bit more murkier than it actually we imagine it would. You know, suddenly a new use of water was there. You know, additional use which we had to deal with on a very short span of time as well. So thank you for that. Now the third question I'm going to pose to Shirish ji is one of the participants have asked is, as groundwater is decreasing day by day due to bore wells in confined aquifers, as these aquifers required centuries to recharge again, are there any options that we can recharge these aquifers in short period of time? What are your views on that, Shirish ji?
As we have discussed in the beginning, Tahaan is doing a lot of work regarding carrying out awareness program about rooftop rainwater harvesting. This is very short-term solution. It works very well. In few areas in Nagpur, the citizens are already doing that. So rooftop rainwater harvesting is first thing, which will enough to recharge a well in your house. So that can be done. Secondly, in many part of our cities, we have this old well. What we call is we use different nomenclature. Sometimes we call it wow, then bawdi, then vihir, or something like that. In many urban areas in Maharashtra, we have these traditional step wells. So we have to work on that and revive those wells. That is need of the hour. Because in urban area, people since this after getting water from drinking water supply scheme, we started neglecting these step wells. And in many areas, citizens have started dumping the garbage. In many areas, these wells are destroyed or on the verge of destruction by way of encroachment. So we can do that. And in urban areas, for example, in Pune, in Aurangabad, in Nagpur, we have these tanks or lakes constructed by dynasties, which are very much there since 100 and 200 years or maybe more. So we can rejuvenate that. Once these lakes or tanks have been rejuvenated by removal of deposited silt in the submergence area. Once the silt is removed, then water recharge to the will begin. And as groundwater recharge will begin, it will take a lot of time because as we have already exploited the groundwater, it will take some time. But slowly we can go on recharging this groundwater, and it will help to overcome the crisis.
Thank you very much, Shirish ji. And I think that's really important. But also along with that, we also have to keep in mind how not to contaminate the aquifers.
Yes.
In a quest to recharge these aquifers, we also have to ensure that there are many areas, where whether it's hand pumps in Bihar or it's some of the hand pumps in Haryana, which has a very high level of arsenic, lead, iron, and this is actually quite a serious thing. So we have to keep that in mind, how we actually doing this recharge, and whether it's through this right technical and scientific backing as well. And if it is done properly, it's great, but we have to keep that in mind as well. Sharad ji, you have your hand up. Can I request you to please write your question in the chat box if that's okay? Is that okay, Sharad ji? Okay, so while he's writing that question, I just wanted to ask another question to the panelists. Is that we talk about technology. In this COVID era, we've come to. I mean, what we're having today is technological advancement, where we're having not face to face, but still focusing more on this online techniques. Sometimes hybrid models as well. So, what role can technology play in terms of securing our water supplies, not just present, but also in the long term for the future as well? So just very quickly from each of you, starting with Mark, that how can we harness the technological aspects available in India, globally, or anywhere else to protect this valuable resource? So over to you, Mark.
Okay, well, sadly we can't share water through Wi-Fi. It'd be nice if we could, wouldn't it? I could, take Divyang and you guys all out for a drink after this, but that's still not going to happen. But what we can do is share knowledge, and that's what we're doing. And moving to wider spatial scales is really important, because many of the traditional solutions work well at village scale, but of course we also have cities. We have Jaipur, we have Delhi, we have Mumbai, we have wherever you're living at the moment, Pune, for example. So we need big, heavy technologies to move water and do stuff. But are we thinking in terms of what local technologies across geographical scales then balance that, so that each catchment is balanced? We spoke earlier about stewardship, good stewardship being balancing recharge with usage at the village scale, but we need to think at whole catchment scale. And currently the way we deploy most of our technology is, as we mentioned earlier, more from further, big tech to exploit deeper groundwater and expose ourselves to more arsenic and fluorosis and all of these other problems, or to dispossess people living in the Himalaya because the water is now piped to Delhi and so forth. So we can use technology to better think, how do we hybridize technologies? And also then to make the money follow the cycle of water, so that the heavily exploiters in cities, in industry, in big irrigation pay a premium that can then incentivize the recharge distributed across the catchment, so that it becomes hydrologically neutral and economically feasible. So matching the technology with the economic cycles and the water cycle. Technology can help us do that in terms of modeling and all of the rest of it. I would make a plea that river interlinking is a high technology, but it's one that is based on more from further. It's based on dispossession. And the concept that, you know, a wet ecosystem is a luxury. Whole wildlife, whole cultures are based on that. So just moving that water to a dry place ignores the living nature of water. You know, it's a matter of merging the best of traditional technology with the wisdoms of modern technology, but keeping the wisdoms of balance underneath everything we do.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. And before I continue, Divyangji, there's a question for you from the audience. The spring-related work that was done in Uttarakhand, can this be replicated in an area like Konkan?
Sure. So I think maybe I'm not aware about the Konkan geological thinking, but I think conceptually the spring shed management concept, wherever it's possible in the similar terrain in hill region, I think definitely could be replicated. The same approach we are already replicating in Nagaland and Mizoram. So I'm sure maybe if it's possible to have a similar kind of a geographical terrain, could be very well accepted. Maybe Mr. Apte, who has worked extensively in Maharashtra, maybe in the right position to answer that also.
Yes, that can be replicated in Konkan region, especially we call it, geographically we call it Eastern Ghat. So topography and geomorphology may vary little bit, but by and large the issue is same. Eastern Ghats are very high in altitude, and mostly the rainfall is very high, around 200 mm or more, but we don't have adequate storage just in that particular area, and land width is very less. And immediately after Western Ghat, after say 100 kilometers or something, there is a sea. So this issue and this initiative of conservation of springs can work very well in Konkan area. I request Divyang to take up one or two places as a pilot project and let us work on that. So it certainly will get better results. I'm sure about that.
Thank you so much, Shirishji. And Divyangji, over to you regarding the technological aspect and how we can work with it going forward.
Okay, yeah. So I think Mark has covered quite a good point on that, and I just would like to complement his point with one addition in terms of the use of data in taking decisions. I think with the fast changing scenario and the technology advancement, it's now very critical to have a right kind of a data. We may be having some sector data, or some sector we don't have even data available. Just give you an simple example that in India we must be having more than 7.5 million wells. However, the observation well, groundwater observation well, is close to 55,000 only. Now, if you don't have a data available, then how you can actually design your policy and how you can design your implementation strategy. So it's important to have a data availability. Also, we need to look at aggregate data may be available, but there is an absence in terms of the hyperlocal level data. So I think those hyperlocal level data management is also important. Currently, we are working very small scale in terms of how the use of technology can help in terms of a right decision support mechanism. In urban areas, we know that the water meter is quite common now, but we have started in rural areas that we look at what is the community need to understand 3-4 areas, and I think the government also need to understand 3-4 areas on the water. One, we look at how their water table is actually fluctuating based on the rainfall and other things. So we actually started measuring the water tables specifically for the drinking water source. Then second, we also say how much water is being consumed for the drinking purpose. up to a village household level. So households, how much water is being actually consumed. We are using the IoT based technological solutions. Now once you get those data, so one thing we take, okay, what are the problem or pain points, and which I think can be fixed up. We can't have a very blanket approach where we try and find out solutions for everyone. We need to find out the right kind of a problem statement first, and I think this data and information can help us in terms of identifying those things. So we started that whole IoT based mechanism, starting from the source to the water quality, to the quantity, to the regularity, to ensure that the efficiency of the systems could be enhanced. Now, if we replicate this kind of a system, that would create a lot of transparency in the government spending, in terms of a community spending, in terms of a philanthropic spending. So I think the data management, which I feel is very important, and there for that I think the technology innovation need to be used up to the grassroots level. So that's, I think, I feel the use of technology, best way of use the technology to help the community to take the right decisions.
That's very important. Yes, thank you, Divyang ji, for that. And quickly, Shirish ji, your take on how technology can be leveraged for protecting the valuable resource.
Yes, while focusing on demand side management, we have seen that, as I have already mentioned, that there is huge losses within the pipeline network of within the city. So technology can be used for carrying out water auditing, finding out leakages, identify the places of leakage, and how to work on that. That can be one aspect. Secondly, as Divyang has rightly said, we need to have data about of the observation wells and wells used for drinking water purposes. So long back, when I was working on World Bank aided project, the name of the project was hydrology project. In that, technology was used for collection of data of observation wells. But the problem is very typical. And they have, in that particular issue, they have used sensors and transducers for gathering data of observation wells. But in summer season, the temperature is very high in our area. It is 45 plus. So the thing doesn't work there, because we have found that in many places the printed circuit board used to get burned because of this high temperature. And so we need to develop in-house technology or Atmanirbhar Bharat, where some industrial houses can certainly develop a technology where we can use transducer, sensor, etc., which will be sturdy in nature and which can sustain the variation of temperature which is occurring seasonally. So we need to develop that. Secondly, in many places we have heard that cloud seeding is used for rainfall, uh, for inducing rainfall. So whether we can use that technology in broad base area, in larger area, we need to understand that. If at all that is possible, then we should need to adopt such initiative, especially in lean year when rainfall is less.
No, thank you, Shiriji. I think one thing which really struck with me was that, having the in-house capability, enhancing the in-house technologies, which can be used for a local scale and a larger scale application as well to take it forward. Now, looking at the time, we're almost over, but I would just like to end this with one question, which has come from one of the participants. And it's quite an interesting one. It's what can be done to so-called development harming, not this one. I apologize for this. I think, yeah. So does the policy making of two states affect the community or people of that state, keeping them away from water use, taking the example of Kaveri issue? Why only people are affected from political issues? Can't policy be lenient within the state as well? Now, I leave it open to any of the panelists to take this question and try to answer it before we end. So over to you.
Yes.
Yes, Shiriji, please.
If you study the Kaveri Delta, you will find that in many districts in the Kaveri Delta, we have huge number of tanks constructed way back during the Chola and Pandya and all those dynasties. The condition of these tanks is very bad. So first thing we can do, if we rejuvenate these tanks, then these tanks can provide water for at least a rotation or two. So we can save the crops. Secondly, in Tamil Nadu, they have first crop is rice and their second crop is also rice. So crop diversification is need of the hour. They call it samba rice and then purvai rice, and this is not proper. If you take rice on rice and again next year rice on rice, this is not fair. So they need to diversify the second crop. They need to develop some better alternative which will consume less water and provide remunerative prices to the farmers as well. So oil seed is another better alternative. We can go for that because every year we are importing huge uh, oil for our domestic consumption, especially edible oil. So if we switch over to edible oil crops such as soybean, sunflower, and for example, when the rye or that is not possible South India, but we can very much go for sunflower. We can very much go for kardai. We can very much go for soybean. So if we perform the task of crop diversification by way of creating an awareness campaign, we can overcome the issue. At least we can reduce the intensity of the issue, so it doesn't become political.
Thank you so much, Shirishji. And I apologize to the other questions. I mean, we'll try to answer it. And if it is targeted to one of our panelists, we'll share it with them through an email and get back to you with the response. So summing up, I mean, the technology is there, the knowledge is there, and the willingness to actually make a change is there as well. And what we need to do is just get going. And yes, there will be hurdles on the way, there'll be issues on the way, there'll be bureaucratic red tapes to cut on the way. But with combining stakeholders at all level of governance, I think we can make a huge impact going forward. And let's ensure that in 2021, as the lockdown and the travel eases, and we go forward away from this pandemic, we actually make a huge contribution, all of us, to this very important and life-saving resource as well. So with this, I'd like to really thank Divyangji, Mark, and Shirishji for the panel discussion. Some very valuable points, and it was a great interactive session as well. And thank you to all the participants for listening as well. And with this, I would like to hand over to Sakshi. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll give you a short information about how to join Tahan. So there are two simple ways. One is you can visit our website and a Google form will be available to you, which you can just fill, and then the HR team will contact you and lead you the further procedures and ask you which department you are interested in. And the second way is we have an Instagram page, so you can directly reach us through our Instagram page.